Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Rottama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We like to recollect last week.
I think we were discussing the theme that nobody falls from Vaikuntha. So, in that unadulterated peace are found only those who know themselves and feel themselves as they belong to me entirely. 3.25.38, they will never meet with destruction. That was the key word. And my unblinking wheel, my disgust in the form of time, does not devour them. As stated in Shruti, he does not return. 8.15.1. Then, since we discussed the six conditions, or often thought to precede fall down, the title here, okay, even this Bhagavad Gita 8.16 was quoted. Then the title here, Tattva Askhalanam. So all the six reasons which was discussed, they were all invalid. The six conditions often thought, it has been shown logically that falling from Vaikuntha is not possible under any circumstances, nor there is a scriptural evidence. And we discussed how Vidya is Anadi, then how the living entity, when he gets transcendental knowledge from Tattvagnya, he can come out of the ignorance. Then how some say that Nitya Siddhas, they fall to material world as they do not have experience of material world, and those who go to the spiritual world from material world, they will not fall down due to their bad experience. So we discussed in this how this argument is invalid. So neither Nitya Siddhas or Sadhana Siddhas can fall down. So many times in the scriptures we use this having attained Vaikuntha, one never falls down. So like that, many verses are there. So such verses are spoken for conditioned living being. So Lord has no need to give instruction to Nitya Siddha devotees because Nitya Siddha devotees are never in ignorance. So no spiritual instructions to be given. When something is denied, it indicates possibility of opposite action. Having attained Vaikuntha, one does not fall down. Such instruction is given to conditioned soul because of possibility of opposite action. And so these instructions are for conditioned souls. So that's an impetus to go to the spiritual world. So Bhagwan assures conditioned souls that his abode is distinct in nature, na tad bhasayate suryo. Any material planet, any planet, one spire's credit gets exhausted, one has to fall down. That is why Lord says that having attained Vaikuntha, one does not fall down. And scriptures inform about subject that is unknown to us, that which cannot be known by ourselves. Hitopadesh verse was spoken, then Shastra eradicates all doubts. Shastra gives knowledge about those entities which cannot be known with our senses. Parokshat kam darshanam. Parokshat
Parokshartakam Aneka
ha.
Samshayochedi
Um,
Parokshartaka Darshanam.
Shastra. Yeah. So Shastra is eye for everyone, and one who does not have any eye for Shastra is considered to be blind person. Then liberated souls go beyond the scriptures. For them, that there's no difference between hell or heaven. That's 1.7.8 Atmaram verses. They are eternally free from ignorance. Pure devotees, they hear scriptures only to relish Lord's pastime. So, so they don't need to be given this assurance. So, Jiva Goswami gives the title as Tato Askhalanam. The Vaikuntha is a place of no fall down. He does not use this word Tato Vartanam, place of no return. So, for executing mission, if someone has to come from Vaikuntha, that's associate of Lord, then it is not called the fall down, like how the jailer goes to the prison cell to reform the prisoners. So then you explain the word Achyutapada, and then chapter 1, Bhagavad Gita, 11th and 18th chapter, the meaning of Achyuta that was spoken. Uh, yeah, just wait. I'm just the class. Sorry, I know. Okay. Please forgive me for okay. So then, sorry, my husband came in. And uh, then when devotees, Acha, okay, Skanda Puran was spoken 1.4.20 and 30 that even when there is great pralaya, uh, the devotees in Vaikuntha, they don't fall down. Um, so he's the Lord is the supreme, imperishable, omnipresent in all planetary systems. Then 2.40 was quoted: no effort on yoga path is ever lost. No effort on yoga path is ever lost. Then the word patitam was discussed. How with regards to this, you explained about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Shishtashtakam verse, sixth one, that fallen condition is from Anadi Kala. So with that regard, you explained that lotus example also, and that red lotus amongst all, and that reference you had given. When patita is used without the adjective anadi, it refers to all the all the fallen living entities. So all the living entities are anadi patita only. And you spoke about how hell is a fallen place and never a time when it was not a fallen place. So it is not previously that hell was not a fallen place. Then verses 4, 5 of Anadi Avidya, 11.11.4, 11.22.10, Bhagavad Gita 13.20, 4.20, 9.70, 10.77, 32. So you elaborately discussed about this Patita. Okay, Prabhuji, you can continue. Let's say 20 now.
Thank you, madam.
Haribol.
Ah,
Yeah, I have one curiosity.
ah,
After going through this the discussions about the falling down. My contention is that there are three types of energy of a law. That is external energy, marginal energy, and the internal energy. What I was thinking now, right from beginning, if with the Lord, all the jivas were in the marginal position, because it was at a marginal position, some of them have attained vaikuntha and then they achieved and they progressed, and some of them from the marginal position fallen down and came to the material world. I mean, this is what logically I thought, but you can throw some light here. Is it what is the exactly initial situation when the Lord was there and all the jivas were there?
That's what we discussed. There are people say that there are 6 reasons or 6 possible reasons are given for a jiva to fall down from the vaikuntha. The 6 possible reasons are
No. I'm not talking about. I have heard that. I'm
Ah.
just talking about the logic which I thought. I mean, I may not be correct. It is totally wrong. See,
See-
initially, the initial situation, like the race is starting, when the beginning, the mark is there before the referee blow his whistle. Everybody at that particular line, start line. So starting when the Lord was there and all the jivas were there, where they are come under the marginal potency, marginal level. Some of they have fallen down and some of they have progressed. That is what I thought. Right in the beginning, just in the beginning.
Yeah, in fact, this beginning point only it is mentioned as Bhagavad Gita 13th chapter shloka. Prakritim purusham chaiva vidyanadi ubhav api. Vikaram cha gunam chaiva vidhi prakriti sambhavan. Both Prakriti and Purusha, the material nature and the living entities, are supposed to be without beginning. And the material nature is beginningless, living entity is beginningless, and the connection of the living entity with the material nature is also beginningless. So the point of right in the very beginning, that itself does not arise from the action. Because the point is that it is a beginningless avidya.
Mm-hmm.
It is a
What is the
beginningless
shloka?
avidya.
Which is the shlok?
13th chapter, Bhagavad Gita, 19th shloka.
13.19.
Huh.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Thank you.
In some edition, it may be 20th, but 13.90. Prakritim purusham chaiva vidyanadi ubhav api vikaram cha gunam chaiva vidhi prakriti sambhavan. So it is mentioned as anadi, so therefore there is no point of talking about in the beginning actually. So the avidya is beginningless.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we will proceed. Okay. So I'll continue to discuss from this point. So moreover, if somebody says that whatever the method of analysis recommended above, even if one follows the method of recommended analysis, but concludes that the subject of the section, the subject of the section is that those who attain vaikuntha from the material world, they will not fall down. But those who are in the vaikuntha eternally, nitya siddhas, they fall down. Like that, people continue to argue. But the point is that like although the section, which is the section of the Jaya Vijaya, or this one, it talks about those who reach Vaikuntha never fall down. It does not mean that those who are eternally in Vaikuntha, they fall down. It does not prove, okay, you are agreeing that those who attain Vaikuntha, they never fall down. But by that, you cannot say that those who are in Nitya Siddha in Vaikuntha, they will fall down. It doesn't prove that actually. The section makes the whole section does not make any such statements, either directly or indirectly. So therefore, to come to such a conclusion that those who go to Vaikuntha from the material world, they will not fall down, but those who are in Vaikuntha eternally, they will fall down. To come to such a conclusion without the scriptural backing is improper. In fact, in this section, in this anuccheda, two verses are spoken. 3.25.37 and 3.25.38. These are the main two shlokas. If we see the 37th shloka talks about those who go to Vaikuntha from the material world. Because the 37th shloka says that after the removal of ignorance, Atho vibhutim, ataha means after the removal of ignorance. They do not hanker after any opulence stored for them by my Yogamaya. So the 37th verse talks about those people who have gone from the material world to the spiritual world after the removal of ignorance. But the 38th shloka is about general statement about Krishna's devotees. 38th shloka. Again, let us read the 38th shloka. न कर्हिचिन्मत्परा शान्तरूपे नङ्क्ष्यन्ति नो मे निमिषो लेडिहेतिः येषामहं प्रिय आत्मा सुतश्च सका गुरु सुहृदो दैवमिष्टम्. This is the 38th shloka. The 38th shloka says that in that abode of unadulterated peace are found only those who know themselves and feel themselves to belong to me entirely. And they will never meet with destruction. Na karhichin, never meet with destruction. My unblinking will never devours, for whom I am totally beloved, their very self, son, friend, preceptor, relative, etc. See, if you see this shloka, it is not saying that in this shloka, those people who went from material world to Vaikuntha, only their opulences will not be destroyed by my time factor. But those who are in Vaikuntha without experience of the material world, they will be they will come under the influence of the time factor. Like that, it is not mentioned. This 38 shloka is a general statement. Any devotee in the Vaikuntha, my time factor will never act upon them. My time factor will never destroy their opulences. It's a general statement. So, on the contrary, the second verse spoken by Sri Kapila clearly states that Krishna's devotees are never bereft of opulence. So, Jiva Goswami's intention in quoting this verse is that they never fall. Okay, still somebody raises another objection. Somebody may say that the cycle of creation and destruction have occurred since beginningless time. innumerable times. So during the maintenance period of the creation, some living entities, they attain liberation, they go to vaikuntha. So in every creation, some living entities attain vaikuntha. And the creation has been happening since beginningless time, infinite number of times. So every creation, some living entities go to vaikuntha, and then considering the point that the Nityasiddha devotees fall from the vaikuntha. Like taking this opinion that the Nityasiddha devotees fall from vaikuntha, and then now in every creation, some devotees go back to vaikuntha. Then so if living beings continue to exit the material world, and there are no new atmas enter by falling from vaikuntha, because from the vaikuntha also the Nityasiddhas are falling down, and since beginningless time it has been going on, so by now all the Nityasiddha devotees must have fallen from vaikuntha. So there are no more atmas left in vaikuntha to fall down. And since the creation has been going on since beginningless time, so every creation, some living entities go back to vaikuntha, and by now, if the living beings continue to exit the material world, and if the living entities continue to exit the material world, then by now the material world should have become empty. In every creation, if some living entities exit the material world to attain vaikuntha, and since the material creation has been going on since infinite number of times, now by now all the living entities should have become liberated and gone to vaikuntha. The material world should have become empty. But then material world is not empty. So many people are still there. This is the proof that there are devotees falling from vaikuntha to fill the material world. Like that, one may give an argument. If living beings continue to exit the material world and no new atmas enter by falling from vaikuntha, then the universe would have been empty by now. So therefore, it would be logical to assume that just like suppose 10 jivas have gone back to vaikuntha, then 10 jivas must be filling from vaikuntha. 10 equal number of jivas must be falling from vaikuntha to replace those who achieve liberation from the material world. So therefore, we have to accept that people falling from vaikuntha to fill up the numbers in the material world. Otherwise, if there are no people falling from vaikuntha, the material world should have been empty by now. Like that, one may give an argument. But such a concept, basically, it is the answer to the objection. Such a concept actually arises from the ignorance of the unlimited nature of the Lord. So that there are unlimited universes and there are unlimited living beings. Unlimited means what? Infinity. From infinity, even if some are removed, what remains is still infinity only. Even in mathematics, the definition of infinity is that infinity minus infinity is not equal to zero. Infinity is minus infinity is equal to infinity only. For example, a lion. Lion is a combination of infinite number of points. There are infinite number of points existing in a line that extends from say point A to point B. And suppose if the line is divided into two parts, then each of those two parts still contains infinite number of points. Although the line is divided into two parts, Infinity minus infinity is still equal to infinity only. That is the understanding. So therefore, there are unlimited universes, there are unlimited living entities. So therefore, even if the living entities, infinite number of living entities have gone from the material world to the vaikuntha, still there are infinite number of living entities living in the material world. That is the meaning of the word infinite, unlimited, asankhya. Moreover, the logic presented here, it will backfire. The logic of the objection, whatever logic presented in the objection, if you don't accept living entity falling from the vaikuntha to the material world, then by now the material world should have become empty. But it is not empty. Therefore, it is a proof that living entities are falling from vaikuntha to here. That is the logic presented here. But this logic, it backfires. How does it backfire? If the Nitya Siddhas are falling from Vaikuntha and they are coming to replace the living entities in the material world, and those who go to Vaikuntha from the material world, they never come back. Then, because time is beginningless, by now, all the Nitya Siddhas from the Vaikuntha must have fallen. And all the Nitya Siddhas must have also returned back to Vaikuntha. And therefore, so since all the by now, since there are beginningless time, all the Nitya Siddhas must have fallen from Vaikuntha and they must have gone back to Vaikuntha, and there are no more virgin Nitya Siddhas who are left in Vaikuntha to fall. So therefore, the material world would still be empty, should have been empty. But the material world is not empty because we are actually discussing now. Material world is not empty. So therefore, the point that in order to accommodate that the fact that the material world is still functioning, for that the living entities must be falling from Vaikuntha to this world. This logic has no, it's not sound logic. So basically, it arises from the ignorance of the unlimited nature of the living entities. And what is the Shastrik Pramana for the unlimited nature of the living entities? It is there in the prayers of the Vedas personified. I'll quote that shloka 10.87.30. Vedas are saying that aparimita, this is the key word. Aparimita dhruvas tanubruto yadi sarvagatas. Tarhina shasyateti niyamo dhruva netarata. Ajanicha yanmayam tad avimuchya niyantr bhavet. Samamanujaanatam yad amatam mata dushtataya. Aparimita, if the countless living entities were all pervading. Countless living entities. That is I just want to focus on that. That's clearly mentioned in the Shastra, the living entities are countless, unlimited. And then further, in commenting on this shloka, 10.87.30, the living entities are countless, Sanatan Goswami quotes a shloka from the Vishnu Dharmottara Puran. So Vajranabha is asking a question to Markandeya Rishi, Vajra Maharaj. So it's a very interesting question. Yekaikasmin nare muktim kalpe kalpe gate dvija abhavishyat jagat shunyam kalasyader abhavatah. Yekaikasmin nare muktim kalpe kalpe gate dvija. Suppose in every kalpa, even if you take that one living entity has attained Vaikuntha, has attained Mukti, by now the world should have been shunya, should have been empty. Time, because time has no beginning, Therefore, even if only one person achieved liberation in each of the bygone kalpas, wouldn't the world be empty by now? This is the question asked by Vajra to Markandeya Rishi. What is Markandeya's answer? Just 1 minute, I'm coming. The Markandeya's answer. Jiva yanyasya sargena nare muktim upagate. Achintya shaktir bhagavan jagat purayate sada. Brahmana sahamuchyante brahmalokam upagataha. Srijyante cha mahakalpe tad vidash chapare janaha. What is the meaning of this? When somebody is liberated, the Supreme Lord who possesses Achintya Shakti, that is the key word in the shloka, brings forth another Jiva and thus always keeps the world full. Those beings who achieve Brahmaloka become liberated along with Brahma. Then in the next cycle of creation, Srijyante, we'll discuss this word, the Lord emits similar beings. Material nature and the living being should be understood to be beginningless. The transformations and the gunas of matter are products of the material nature. So, the Markandeya Rishi is answering that when the living entities get liberated and attain vaikuntha, the Lord emits similar living beings. So, here there is a question. So the Lord emits similar living beings. So, therefore, there is no need to assume that in order to fill up the gap, that living entities must be falling from Vaikuntha to fill up the material world. There is no need to assume that the living entities must be falling from Vaikuntha to replace the liberated beings. So the important word here is that the Lord has Achintya Shakti. Previously also we had discussed Achintya Shakti in great detail. So now somebody may ask the question, living entities are anadi. There is no birth for the Jivatma. Najayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuyah ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano na kanyate hanyamane sharire. There is no birth for the living entity. Then why does the Markandeya Rishi say the Lord brings forth other jivas? By this statement, it appears that the living entities, the jiva atmas, take birth. But there are so many statements in the Shastra which say that the living entities have no birth. So Sanatana Goswami reconciles. He says that there are unlimited number of dormant living entities who are already present. The Lord is simply activating them as He desires. It is not that He is creating the living entities. Because the living entities are without birth. But the unlimited dormant living entities are already present. The Lord is simply activating them. This is what in this word, in this shloka, Markandeya Rishi's answer, Srijyante word is used. Srijyante means, one meaning of the word Srijyante means creation, creates. But if we take this meaning creates, then it would contradict many other statements in the Shastra which say that the living entity is without birth. So, but therefore we cannot take the meaning of the word srijyante as creating. But the word srijyante also has another meaning which means to emit. That means the living entities were already present. The Lord is simply activating them. That's what it means that he emits them. So therefore, we have to take the meaning of the word srijyante as emits. The Lord emits living entities. In the next cycle of creation, the Lord emits similar beings. That is the meaning we have to take. So, srijyante then means to release the jiva from the dormant state into the active condition. So therefore, the conclusion is that nobody, that means either Nitya Siddha or Sadhana Siddha, can fall from Vaikuntha. So now the next natural question is that if we have not fallen from Vaikuntha, then where did we come from? Where do we come from? How did we come to this bound condition? What is the cause of our bound condition? That is the question. The simple answer is that we are Nitya Baddha. Anadya Vidya Yuktasya. That means we are perpetually bound. We are in this bound condition since beginningless time. So we have always been bound by the material energy due to the ignorance of who we are and what God is. So there was never a time when we were not involved with the material nature. Material nature, now the shloka which I quoted, the beginning to Balakrishna Prabhu's question. Prakritim purusham chaiva vidyanadi ubau api vikaramscha gunamchaiva vidhi prakriti sambhavan. Know that prakriti, material nature, and the purusha, the conscious living entity, are both without beginning. Vikaramscha gunamchaiva. Know, however, that the modifications and the gunas are produced from prakriti. So the word anadi is very important. So not only the living entity individually is anadi, and not only the prakriti, the material nature individually is anadi, but the connection between, the relation between the living entity and the material nature. That means living entity having a material body. The relation between the living entity and the material nature, that is also anadi. That is also anadi. Therefore, Baldev Vidya Bhushan, commenting on the shloka, is confirming that point. Tayoho samshlesho api anadi riti bhavaha. Samshlesho api, that means the relation of the living entity with the material nature, that is also since anadikal. I also quoted one shloka. It comes in the 4th canto, 29th chapter. So I'll again show you that shloka. .29.70 Naham mameti bhavoyam purushe vyavadiyate yavad buddhimano ksharta gunavyuho hyanadiman. This is from Narada's teaching to Prachina Parishad. The connection with the grass body expressed through me and mine does not cease for the jiva as long as the beginningless subtle body composed of intelligence, mind, senses, and sense object continues to exist. So the anadiman is the adjective for the subtle body. Beginningless subtle body. So the same thing is mentioned here. The Baldev Vidya Bhushan says that Tayoho samshlepo api anadirati bhava. The connection of the living entity with the material nature is also since anadi time. So more details will also be presented in the Paramatma Sandarbha. But then somebody may say, now there is another objection raised. One may say that there are verses in the Bhagavatam which talk about the living entity being with Krishna. And then living entity fell down. There are verses in the Bhagavatam which say that, for example, in the 4th canto, 28th chapter, 53rd and 54th shloka. This is in the Puranjan story. When Puranjan, in the story of Puranjan, he marries a lady and then he begets so many children and then he leaves his body while remembering his wife. So therefore, in the next life, he becomes a woman. Because he was a pious person, he was a he was a pious person. So next life, he becomes a woman, Vaidarbi. But this Vaidarbi gets married to a great devotee, Malayadvaja. And this Malayadvaja, King Malayadvaja, he performs, after retiring from the kingdom, he goes to perform austerities in the forest. That time, Vaidarbi accompanies her husband, Malayadvaja. Then at a certain point, Malayadvaja leaves his body. Vaidarbi is all alone in the forest. And Vaidarbi starts crying, lamenting. So at that time, a old Brahmana comes and speaks to Vaidarbi. That is the verse spoken here. I'll read that shloka. Apismarasi chatmanam avijnata sakamsake hitva mam padamanvichan bhauma bhogarato gatah hamsavaham cha tvam charya sakayau mansayanau abhutamantara vauka sahasra parivatsaran. So here the Brahmana is saying, do you remember yourself from your previous state when you were with your friend named Avijnata, means unknown. You left me seeking material acquisition, being attached to worldly sense pleasures. O noble one, you and I are two swans, two friends who have been living together in the Manasa lake for many thousands of years, far from our original home. So usually people quote this shloka to show that, because according to the Puranjan story, this Avijnata, this Brahmana represents the Supreme Lord. And this Vaidarbi is the living entity. So the Brahmana is saying that, do you not remember that we are actually friends since a long time? Do you not remember that we were together? I'll quote this Prabhupada's purport. Prabhupada's purport in this shloka, Prabhupada says that especially in the purport, Prabhupada says, living entity was there with Krishna. Where is that point? See, here it is said, the natural position of the living entity is to serve the Lord in a transcendental loving attitude. When the living entity wants to become Krishna himself or imitate Krishna, he falls down into the material world. Since Krishna is the Supreme Father, his affection for the living entity is eternal. When the living entity falls down into the material world, the Supreme Lord, through his Paramatma, keeps company with the living entity. In this way, the living entity may someday return home back to God. So, if you read this section of the purport, it appears that the living entity has fallen from the spiritual world. He was with Krishna, he has fallen from the spiritual world. Another place, Prabhupada is more clearly saying, see, the original home of the living entity is the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, both the living entities and the Lord live together very peacefully. Since the living entity remains engaged in the service of the Lord, they both share a blissful life in the spiritual world. However, when the living entity wants to enjoy himself, he falls down into the material world. Even while he is in that position, the Lord remains with him as the super soul. So, in this way, Prabhupada speaks about, usually these two verses are quoted to show that the living entity has fallen from the spiritual world to material world. But then, in these two shlokas, when we take the, without the purport, when you just read the shloka, when you read the literal translation of the shloka, in the shloka literal translation, it is not mentioned that the living entity has fallen from Vaikuntha. It's not mentioned in the translation. And when we see the commentaries of the previous acharyas, that these verses refer to the living entity residing with Mahavishnu during the time of total annihilation. Because in the Puranjan story, in the beginning of the 29th chapter, King Prachina Barishit asks a question. You have described this allegorical story, but I am not able to understand the purport of the allegorical story. Can you please explain the purport of this allegorical story? And when he asked that question, Narada Muni describes that what each characters mentioned in the story, what do they represent? So Narada Muni says, for example, Narada Muni clearly says that the avijnata mentioned in the story refers to the super soul. The 4.29.3. Yo avijnata hritastasya purushasya sakeshwaraha. Yanna vijnayate pumbir namabirva kriya gunahi. Avijnata refers to the purusha. Avijnata hritastasya purushasya sakeshwaraha. Avijnata represents the super soul. So therefore, this verse, the other acharyas, whether Vishwanath Chakravarti or other acharyas, when they comment on the shloka, this verse refers to living entity being present to the super soul, Mahavishnu. And you know that in the spiritual world, there is no super soul aspect. Super soul is there only in the material world. The super soul is not there in the spiritual world. Spiritual world, there is only Bhagavan aspect. So the living entity being with the super soul, it doesn't refer to living entity being with the Bhagavan in the spiritual world in Vaikuntha. Prabhupada says that the super soul is like a IAS officer appointed during the Kumbh Mela. So now in the Kumbh Mela, in the Prayagraj, that Kumbh Mela is declared as a separate district. That only that region of Kumbh Mela, that is a separate district for this period. Prayagraj is a district, but for this particular period, that particular area of Kumbh Mela is a separate district. So separate IAS, IPS officers are appointed to supervise that. So those IAS, IPS officers are appointed only for that particular period of Kumbh Mela. Similarly, super soul is there only in the material world. Super soul is appointed only in the material world for the period of the material creation. So in this shloka, the living entity being with the super soul is being mentioned. It's not talking about the living entity being with Krishna. That is what the previous acharyas have mentioned. And moreover, how this also confirmed in the shloka, because the Sahasra Parivatsaran word is there. Sahasra Parivatsaran means for 1,000 cycles. So usually the Brahma's daytime is 1,000 yuga cycle. Brahma's night time is another equal 1,000 number of yuga cycles. So for the Brahma's daytime ends, there is annihilation. And those living entities, apart from those who are in the higher planets, other living entities, they are annihilated. They go into sleep. They go and sleep in the body of Mahavishnu. So therefore, Sahasra Parivatsaran also confirms that fact. The word Sahasra Parivatsaran confirms the fact, since the period of annihilation is equal to 1,000 cycles of the 4 yugas. So giving up my company means taking birth in the next cycle of creation. So therefore, these two verses which are usually quoted to show that the living entity has fallen from Vaikuntha, it is not talking about living entity falling from Vaikuntha. It is talking about living entity being in the presence of Mahavishnu during the time of annihilation, and then when the cycle of creation starts, the living entity leaves the company of Mahavishnu and then comes and takes birth in this world. That is what this verse is talking about. And moreover, Narada Muni is speaking an allegorical story to Puranjana. So allegorical story should not be taken literally. Allegorical story, it's an indirect expression, Parokshavada. Narada Muni himself has mentioned later that I have shown you spiritual truths by speaking in an indirect way through the Parokshavada. So the words Parokshena must be noted. This is 4.28.65. Bhagavan is also called as Paroksha Priya. There is a verse in the 11th canto where Krishna says that I am also pleased by the indirect glorification of me mentioned in the Shastras. That's why Bhagavan's one of the name is Paroksha Priya. So from the above analysis, based on the authority of the Shastra, it is concluded that without the doubt, the living entities, living being does not fall from Vaikuntha. But still, for those people, for the benefit of those who have not been exposed to the full breadth of the Bhagavatam's view, there is a little fresh analysis of this topic from another angle. So in the Tattva Sandarbha, we have discussed, there are 3 main pramanas: Pratyaksha Pramana, Anumana Pramana, and Shabda Pramana. So we have seen several evidences from the Shabda Pramana that the living entities never fall from the Vaikuntha. And Pratyaksha Pramana and Anumana Pramana cannot help on this topic, because the subject of living entity falling from Vaikuntha to material world, it is beyond the capacity of our perception. We cannot perceive with our senses. So Pratyaksha Pramana has no validity, especially in the transcendental subject matters. And Anumana Pramana, logic which is a part of Anumana, can be used to analyze the Shastra. Can be used to analyze the Shastra, but Anumana Pramana also cannot. Anumana Pramana can be used as a tool. Logic can be used as a tool, but logic is not the simply by depending on the logic, one cannot understand things which are beyond our, one cannot understand transcendental subject matters. Logic can be used as a tool. Logic which conforms to your Shastra is accepted as a valid means of knowing. When Srila Rupa Goswami defines the Uttamadhikari, he says that Shastre Yuktaucha Nipunau. A Uttamadhikari is somebody who is expert in logic, argument, and the revealed scriptures. So here, Shastre Yuktau. Shastre Yuktau, Yukti means logic. And Jiva Goswami says that in this shloka, the logic referred to here is that logic which conforms to scripture, not dry logic. Dry logic is something which does not conform to scripture. When it is mentioned that Uttamadhikari is expert in logic, he is expert in logic which conforms to scripture. So what is the logic which conforms to scripture? He quotes a shloka from Vaishnava Tantra. Purva paranurodena konvarto abhimato bhavet ityadyam uhanam tarka shushka tarkam tu varjayet. Appropriate logic is that which is used to reach the proper conclusion on the strength of previous statement and the subsequent statement. So, when you want to understand the statement of a Shastra, you have to see the context. What is the previous statements? What are the later statements? After seeing that, then you understand the meaning of the sentence. So, dry logic, in other words, logic devoid of such a truth visioning, should be rejected. So, therefore, logic and argument are not bereft of value. Logic has value. Logic can assist us to understand the conclusion of the scriptures. Logic can help us to resolve the contradiction. But the logic should be not dry logic, it should be logic that which conforms to Shastra. There are many places in the Shastra we find sometimes contradictory statements. For example, one place in the Shastra it says that by performing Chaturmas Vrata, one can go to heaven and live eternally. There are other places in the Shastra which say that whatever enjoyment we experience in heaven, that is also temporary. Once the punya gets over, one falls down from the heaven. So naturally, both these statements are contradicting each other. So the observation of Chaturmasya does not directly lead to imperishable merit, but only to the indirect possibility of such. So both these statements are contradictory. Only one of the statement must be true. Both cannot be true. I'll end in another 5 minutes. So the statement is neither false nor true in its primary sense. A secondary meaning must be applied to at least one of the statements in order to reconcile the statements. So therefore, we see in the Shastra, several places in the Shastra, that the enjoyment in heaven is not permanent. Kshine punye martyalokam vishanti. Antavattu phalam tesham tadbhavat yalpamedasam. There are several statements in the Shastra which talk about the temporary nature of the heavenly planets. So therefore, by seeing several such statements, we can see that, so the statement which says that by observing the Chaturmasya Vrata, one attains imperishable merit. This statement is not an absolute statement. Rather, this statement is to inspire people who have a strong material identification, who are strongly attached to enjoying the fruits in order to inspire them to practice the Chaturmasya Vrata. And in the course of practicing the Chaturmasya Vrata, he may contact a saintly person and he can get a pure knowledge from the saintly person. And then he starts the path of liberation. So therefore, Krishna also says that Shreyan Dravyamayat Yagyat Jnana Yagya Parantapa. Sarvam Karma Kilam Partha Jnane Parisamapyate. Better than the Dravya Yagya is the sacrifice of knowledge. All actions attains completion in the transcendental knowledge. So generally people are attached to the fruitive activities. So if the scriptures categorically reject all the karmas and its fruits, suppose if the scriptures are talking only about the pure devotional service, then many religiously inclined people, but who are materially driven, who are not ready for pure devotional service, they will lose faith even in karma yoga. Because most people are not ready for pure devotional service. They want to enjoy this world. So for those people who are not ready for pure devotional service, at the same time who want to enjoy this world, in order to engage them in order to facilitate their enjoyment in a pious way, the scriptures talk about the path of karma kanda. And Krishna also says in the Bhagavad Gita 3rd chapter, do not unsettle the mind of spiritually unaware who are attached to fruitive action. Therefore, scriptures are teaching in a very mature way. So teaching is a very expert art. An expert teacher is somebody who educates in such a way that students embrace the teaching as their own without a confusion. So the conditioned beings, they do not aspire to get out of the material world. They want to make this world a happy place. But a compassionate teacher is moved to help relieve them of their material identification. But the conditioned souls are not ready for it. So therefore, the compassionate teacher gives the medicine with a sugar coating. They just like parents give the medicine with the sugar coating. Similarly, the compassionate teacher, compassionate shastras give the path of karma kanda, but with a spiritual element contained within that. So in the Purva Mimamsa, this is called as the Parisankhya Vidhi. That means using an injunction to accomplish something other than the apparent aim. So the statements of Karma Kanda, they appear to apparently encourage a person to perform Karma Kanda. But the real aim of those statements of Karma Kanda is actually to inspire a person for liberation. That is the real aim. But the apparent aim is that to inspire a person to go to heaven. So therefore, it is not always easy to understand the intention of the scriptures. Intention of the scriptures. So therefore, that when the 4th canto, 28th chapter, 53rd shloka, when that Brahmana is speaking to Vaidarvi, do you not remember that we were together? So it is easy to interpret, oh, this refers to living entity being with the Supreme Lord in Vaikuntha. No, it is easy to interpret like that. But we have to very carefully see that this verse is not talking about living entity being with the Bhagavan in Vaikuntha. Rather, it is talking about living entity being with Mahavishnu during the time of annihilation. How the living entity is there with the Mahavishnu, sleeping with the body of Mahavishnu. It is talking about that. Therefore, the scriptures are it's not always easy to understand the intention of the scripture. We'll come end with this. the Bhagavatam, in the Navayogendra Samvada, the shloka comes. Karma karma vikarmeti vedavado na laukikaha vedasya cheshwaratmatvat tatra muhyanti surayah parokshvado vedoyam balanam anushasanam karma mokshaya karmani vidatte hyagadam yata. Somebody can read this translation. Prescriptions, prohibitions. Prescriptions, prohibitions, and transgressions of prescribed duty are to be known from the Veda and not just through hearsay. Since the Veda is a direct revelation of God, even the Devatas are confused about these three types of actions: karma, vikarma, and akarma. The Veda speaks indirectly. Its real import is to impel one to transcend karma and its fruits. But it prescribes karma for the ignorant, just as a child is tempted with the sweets in order to make him take a bitter medicine. So therefore, merely citing the references will not establish the truth conclusively. One has to properly analyze the scriptures to understand the true intention of the Shastra. We'll continue this further. I think next week we'll complete this anuccheda. Then we'll go to the next one. Hare Krishna. Anybody has any questions?
So, Prabhuji, oh, sorry.
Yes, Balakrishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, we are talking about the spiritual aspect of the thing, but then here comes the Vedas about the instruction, prescriptions, and the Devatas are getting confused. Now, is it the Vedas come in between just to confuse people or test people before they progress to the spiritual world?
No, Vedas are like the...
Because
See, Vedas are like...
guide them of God.
No, Vedas are the mother. Mother having unlimited children. A mother understands the nature of each child. Mother does not give same number of chapati, same number of idli to all the children. Every child has different capacity, different nature. So therefore, the Vedas, like a compassionate mother, understanding the nature of different living entities, gives different paths. Yeah, the ultimate goal of the Vedas is one. The ultimate goal of the Vedas is Vedescha Sarver Akameva Vedyo Vedanta Krit Veda Videvacha. Ultimate goal of the Vedas is that Brahma studied the Vedas 3 times. Bhagavan Brahma Katsyena Tri Ranvikshya Manishaya Tad Adhyavasyat Kutastu Ratiratman Yato Bhave. To develop attraction toward the personality of God. But most of the living entities are not ready for this. So therefore, in order to gradually guide those living entities to this path, the Vedas give the path of Karma Kanda. Because most people are only interested in enjoying this world. So therefore, Vedas give the path of Karma Kanda with a spiritual message. Within that Karma Kanda also, there will be elements of glorification of Vishnu, chanting of the holy names of Vishnu. These things will be there.
Yes. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Mhm.
So, Prabhuji, you also mentioned that when living entity wants to attain transcendent knowledge and he comes across a tattvagnya and all. So, so a person who's really wanting to seek spiritual knowledge, I know, like I've heard that Paramatma guides, etc. But then I've also heard that those who want to be cheated will go to all these people. So, but there are some, I don't know, this is my understanding that there are some sincere seekers, but unfortunately they go there, in some pseudo gurus and all. So, like, I'm just talking about my brother's son. I think I have introduced you to him also. So, he's a spiritual seeker, and now he's into this other things like Vipassana for many hours together. He can just go into trance, he can just meditate for so much time. So, I mean, how is it that the Paramatma does not guide? He has no selfish motive in the sense that he does so much of good to people. He is doing a lot of selfless work.
Yeah.
Like, he's come from America permanently to India to do good to people.
Mhm.
He's a PhD in computer science. So he's using all his knowledge for upliftment of farmers who don't have computer knowledge and, trying to
Mhm.
design a software in the mobile phones and all. So I just and he does amazing work. Like, he has this set of people like who are downtrodden, like they were maybe polishing shoes. He's gone to Ahmedabad. That's our hometown. So he just goes there, picks up these people, engages them in some nice talent which he sees that they would be interested in, encourages them, and then he takes them to US, and then there is a concert over there. So his life is like that.
See, there are many people who are in Sattva Guna, may be selfless, but that's not the cause of bhakti. They may not come to bhakti because the one of the fundamental siddhanta of bhakti is that bhakti is caused by bhakti alone. Bhakti is caused by nothing other than bhakti. So somebody is selfless in Sattva Guna, he wants to help the poor, we appreciate that. But there is no bhakti sukriti here. Because of that, a person can come to Krishna or a devotee of Krishna. So only a bhakti sukriti can help a person come close to Krishna. Can guide a person to devotional service. Can make a person attracted to bhakti. So that is one of the fundamental siddhanta. Otherwise, sometimes there could be people who may be from a sinful background, but they might have unknowingly rendered some devotional service, and that bhakti sukriti may help them to get attracted to bhakti. Uh, that is the we can well we can try uh, we can try to speak to them, but sometimes philanthropists also, those who are in Sattva they have good chance of at least they can understand something. But still, there are many people who are in philanthropy. This one, they make that as a goal. Some philanthropists think that God has given this world to correct us. God has sent us to correct us. So they do philanthropy, they do social service, but some of them don't believe in God, or they think themselves to be the messengers of God, something like that. So because of that, when such mood is there, then it is difficult to preach. Because I'm not sure what's about your brother's son, but I'm saying that the main point is that bhakti is the cause of bhakti. So simply sattva guna activities cannot be the cause of bhakti.
But the Sattva-guna, for a person in Sattva-guna, it is easier to catch bhakti, right? I mean, if given the right
It is
guidance.
easy, it is helpful in the beginning. Jnana and Vairagya, Rupa Goswami says that Jnana and Vairagya are somewhat helpful in the beginning of the bhakti. But at the same time, he is not saying that Jnana and Vairagya are the cause of bhakti. Jnana and Vairagya are helpful in the beginning. The cause of bhakti is bhakti only. Kasa Bhakti, he says that Kasa Bhakti is attraction to Krishna or attraction to Bhakti scriptures, like that he says. I'll show you that Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada's statement.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Okay. Now, see, Prabhupada says that I'm not exactly able to find the statement. Prabhupada says that those who are attracted to scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, the Bhakti scriptures, that is the Kasa Bhakti. So Kasa Bhakti is actually Bhakti only. Jnana and Vairagya are somewhat helpful in the sense to, because when a person does not have bad habits, somebody has Sattva Guna, one can sit and listen like that. At the same time, it is not the cause of Bhakti, they are somewhat helpful. Hare Krishna.
So for such people, if you want to cultivate them, it's only when Lord wants to, right?
We
Because
can, whatever from our side, we can, whether even if they are not ready to listen, sometimes one may be full with themselves. Oh, I'm doing. Some people may not be in a position to listen, but we can somehow expertly engage them in some activity of bhakti, making them do some service or some talent for uh, somehow we have to trick them to perform some devotional service. Somebody charitable, then we can ask some charity for some Krishna related some services, something like that. Trick them, not even if they not directly or somewhat indirectly also. Or we have to see intelligently. And then when they get some bhakti sukriti, and then gradually when they do that repeatedly, gradually they will become attracted to bhakti in due course, either in this life, next life.
I think yourself and Govind Prabhuji had met him, if you remember.
Now I'm remembering.
Yeah, you had met him. So when he comes here, he goes to US often and he comes to Bombay also for his business work. So he meets me and then he tells me also we'll go to the temple. And then in the temple, he'll just stand in one side of the temple and then he can just shut his eyes and he can go into, I mean, just trance, like this kirtan happening or anything like that. He can just shut off himself. Or he can just sit his back against a pillar and then he just closes his eyes and he just goes into trance,